Imagine for a moment that you're watching a movie, and in the opening scene of said movie, you see a gun hanging from the wall, and the camera lingers on it for a few seconds. It then pans over to two people deep in a conversation. It's about something arbitrary, let's say, doing your taxes. Then a phone rings, one of them picks it up, and the call to adventure begins. The scene then ends and the gun doesn't appear ever again. How do you feel? Cheated, yeah? Why did they show that gun at the start if there was no use for it? Well, this is what Chekhov's gun, a narrative principle made by, I'll let you have 3 guesses at this, Chekhov, states. If you're going to show something in a story with an intent, then it must serve a purpose later on. This specific idea isn't tied to guns, of course, and we're going to see exactly how it's used in the first season of The Walking Dead, which utilizes this principle and another immensely important one, foreshadowing, to craft, in my opinion, its best season in the entirety of the series, and acts as an example of what every writer should attempt to emulate, at least some part of it, in order to add a sense of satisfaction and catharsis into their stories. Episode 1 establishes a lot. It needs to because it's our introduction to the world and the apocalypse. I'll cut to the chase, but Rick, Shane, and some other police officers are on one, hot on the trail of a couple escapees, when Rick gets wounded and falls into a coma. There are 3 things here that are important. First is the fact that Rick gets shot in the first place. It's a perfect method to deliver exposition to the viewer without seeming contrived, as characters can explain what's happening to him later on and with significant detail. Second is the little reprimand that Rick gives Leon Bassett here. It establishes him as the careless type who is slightly incompetent at what he does, and this gets paid off later on. Finally, there is this shot here. 2 crows devouring the body of a dog or some other creature. It bears striking resemblance to how walkers eat the flesh of people later on, down to the fact that 2 could be munching on 1. It even gets a callback in this same episode. Rick then wakes up, gets adjusted to his surroundings, and opens the door to his room. He casually pushes against a bed blocking the door. This isn't drawn to attention or focused on in any way, so the average viewer would probably just brush past it. But you'll notice his door was the only one that was blockaded, so someone must have done it deliberately, to save his life. We of course know why and how, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Making his way to his house, Rick discovers his family is all gone. His wife and son are nowhere to be seen, and this makes him buckle down in confusion and fear. He then does something which I really like, and that's question his reality, whispering, "Is this real?" It's too often in a movie or show that I see when some characters are confronted with a completely foreign phenomena that would send someone into a coma, they instead just accept it immediately after some feigned shock. Here Rick actively questions his reality, and attempts to wake up from it, which grounds it a little bit in the real world. Yes, that makes no sense, there are zombies, but just bear with me. Fast forward through Rick meeting Morgan, he bids him adieu by warning him that the walkers may seem harmless alone, but when they're in groups, he better watch his ass. Directly after, we see the reanimated corpse of Leon Bassett. He probably didn't keep the safety off. We then get some scenes of the group up in the mountain, and Rick finding his way to Atlanta riding a horse. Some more shots of him entering the city, and then we get this scene. Some zombies shuffle out of a destroyed bus and startle the horse. Rick then comforts it by saying, "Steady, there's just a few, nothing we can't outrun." Rick was displaying signs of arrogance, carelessness maybe. Perhaps because he was on his high horse? I genuinely don't know if this pun is intentional or just the best happy little accident ever, but I'm glad it exists. A minute later we get a shot of 2 crows picking on a corpse. They got an upgrade, good for them. Soon after, Rick hears the helicopter sounds. Later on, some members of the group say he hallucinated it, but we know that he's perfectly lucid here, so he couldn't have. This pays off a mere 8 seasons later. Finally, we get the scene where Rick gets ambushed by the zombie horde, gets cornered and straight into the tank. He didn't heed Morgan's warning. They looked like few enough to handle, but unfortunately, he didn't watch his ass well enough. Next episode, we're greeted by Rick, stuck in a tank with no way out. Glenn then contacts him and he makes a run for it. Not before, however, picking up a tiny grenade from the pockets of a still walker. I love this grenade so much. A couple of minutes later, Rick asks Glenn why he even bothered attempting to save him, and he mentions that if he were ever that far up shit creek, he'd hope someone would do the same for him. How poetic. The rest of the episode is great. Walker dismemberment, plot convenient rain, and keys falling into drains. At the very end, while Glenn is driving his Dodge Challenger into the sunset, the alarm beeping has the same BPM as the song playing in the background. You can't hear it here because I'm not touching copyright with a 10-foot stick, but trust me, it's there. The next episode is quality television, but I'm not going to cover it here because it doesn't include any of the moments I'm looking for, so off to episode 4. Here we discover that Merle, the racist badass that he is, cut off his hand and cauterized it, escaping the building that he was trapped in. Daryl then gives this comment: "Nobody can kill Merle but Merle." So much for that. Skip to Jim digging graves up on the cliff, acting all strange. This is the second biggest foreshadowing this season, and easily the most morbid one. Fast forward to when Rick and the gang are discussing plans to rescue Glenn, and when Rick is asked why he's even doing this in the first place, he mentions that what life he has, he owes to Glenn. This is what he was talking about when he saved Rick. His good deed came back to save him later on. At the end of the episode, we understand why Jim was digging the graves, and it ends with a grim note. So up until now, I've been mainly summarizing when the show sets up scenes that will get a resolution either later on this season or in the next ones. Not every episode has this, of course, and episode 5 has only one moment that I enjoy enough to include, which is the resurrection of Amy, or rather her rebirth. A cruel twist on what was meant to be her birthday. Finally, we have reached the season finale. It opens with a flashback to the hospital Rick was in. We follow Shane moving through the rooms and witnessing the atrocities that the army is committing. When he finds Rick, he tries to save him, but can't because he's unsure if unplugging him would just cause him to die. He checks his pulse and apparently hears nothing. As a final effort, he blocks the door to Rick's room with a hospital bed, the only reason he stayed alive in the first place. This flashback also serves another purpose, which is to give context to Shane's dialogue later on with Laurie. A flashback at the start allows that scene to continue uninterrupted, and cut to nothing. Moving on to when the group enters the CDC. In this shot we can see the timer in the background, albeit blurred. It also makes an appearance here, and here. These are very subtle, and I certainly didn't notice them on my first watch through, but they are a clever way to show that things are not what they seem. Another moment worth pointing out is that when Dr. Jenner talks about the doctors that quote-unquote opted out, the second he says it, the camera immediately cuts to Jackie, the only one in the group who decided to stay. This could very well be intentional, as I don't think any shot would not be deliberate, at least in this stage of the show. A neat detail which utilizes how the medium of TV works as a literary device. Another one is Laurie picking up a book titled A Reasonable Doubt. I really don't think I'm seeing hidden details for the sake of seeing them, because my way of thinking goes like this. In the scene, they wanted Laurie to pick up a book, and they actively had to choose one and its title to appear. So it should at least allude to the plot in some way. So again, this could be another way to foreshadow, but a very subtle one at that. And finally, the main moment of this entire season, and why I decided to make this video in the first place. The grenade coming back to save the day. My mind was on this damn grenade for the entirety of the season, because I was like, there is no way they're gonna make him pick up one and never use it again. Thing is, I thought the payoff would be much earlier, and to see it here, this late into the season, provided such a great moment of catharsis that I think I was jumping up and down when I first saw it. I might be only slightly exaggerating. This is an immaculate use of Chekhov's gun, or grenade, that was shown in episode 2, and paid off in episode 6. That was a 4-episode difference. However, we've seen that some were resolved in the same episode that they were introduced in, or took just one episode, or heck, maybe even 8 seasons. But analyzing an entire season's worth of foreshadowing is a task that I'm not ready for today, so let's just summarize the ones we've seen this far. In episode 1, we see Leon Bassett being reprimanded by Rick for not being focused and careless with his firearm. Same episode, we see him as a walker, and Rick shoots him in the head. We see 2 crows picking out a dog, and later on after the apocalypse, we see them picking out a corpse. Foreshadowing mixed with imagery. Morgan warns Rick about the walkers and how they could seem harmless one at a time, but are dangerous in groups. Rick gets ambushed because of this exact reason. Rick hears the helicopter and we see it reappear much later on. Rick picks up the grenade. He ends up using it to escape from the CDC 4 episodes later. Glenn saves Rick. Rick saves Glenn 2 episodes later. In episode 4, Jim digs the graves because of a dream. Those same graves end up being used after the massacre. In episode 6, we faintly see the countdown of the generators in the background. They explain it's to count down the CDC's imminent explosion. The camera cuts to Jackie after a suicide comment. She ends up being the only one to stay. I love these moments so much. They signify that there was a lot of thought put into writing the show, and that every detail matters. It reminds me of another favorite of mine, Gravity Falls. That show is chock full with foreshadowing and mystery, which, when paid off, bring immense satisfaction to the viewer. It instills a sense of mystery in the show, and makes it feel like it's part of something bigger. Another key moment in the finale is when Dr. Jenner whispers something to Rick that even we the audience can't hear, and that keeps us thinking throughout the next episodes, wondering what he could have said and what are its implications. This is a theme that the show will continue throughout, albeit less succinctly than the grenade payoff, but at least you'll be safe in knowing that when you see a gun hanging on a wall, it's sure to fire off sooner rather than later. Thank you for watching till the end, and I hope you've enjoyed this rather weird analysis of a 13-year-old show. But goddammit, if AMC is still making spin-offs, then by God I can still make analysis videos. Until next time, bye bye.